Hey, what's up and welcome to Draft Theory. Today I'm taking you through my first big board of the cycle. Let's get into it. I can understand a pretty decent case for any of the top 3 players in this year's class to go number 1. I feel like you can really have those 3 in almost any order you like, but to me I still have Darren Peterson at number 1. Standing at 6'6", he just has that rare combination of shiftiness, strength, and shot-making confidence that separates good guard prospects from the future All-Stars. He creates advantages almost effortlessly, whether it's blowing past defenders, stopping on a dime for pull-ups, or manufacturing buckets late in the clock when the offense stalls. What really sells me with Peterson is just how natural everything looks. The footwork, the balance, the pacing. There's a kind of smoothness to his game that reminds you of the elite NBA scoring guards. I am a tiny bit concerned about the number of strange DNPs he's had over the course of the season. It feels like there's always some kind of small issue causing him to be out, whether that's cramping, nagging pain, or illness-related issues, but it feels more like conditioning or management issues than a long-term concern. He hasn't played his best basketball lately by any means, but he also clearly isn't 100%. I've seen enough moments this season from Peterson to make me feel confident in his outlook going forward. It feels weird to say that the player leading the nation in scoring is an upside player in this year's draft, but it just goes to show the talent and ceiling of the BYU freshman. At 6'9" with elite athleticism, coordination, and open floor explosiveness, he checks nearly every physical box teams want in a modern wing. One of the most impressive things I've seen with AJ so far is how much his game has improved from the start of the season. Early on, his game looked much more chaotic than it is now, and you can really see that the game is slowing down for him already and that he's processing the game at a much higher level and really adapting to defenders' movements. When he's at his best, Bonster impacts the game in multiple ways, attacking closeouts, finishing above the rim, creating offense in transition, and using his length defensively to disrupt the passing lanes. He's still raw in terms of his shot selection and playmaking reads, but those are areas that you kind of bet on given his trajectory so far. AJ is coming off one of his best stretches of the season, and he hasn't scored below 20 points in over a month. The tools are obvious, the production is undeniable, and the growth has been impressive. It's becoming increasingly harder to overlook Bonster. It feels so wrong to have Cam Boozer at 3. I really like him as a prospect, but the top of this draft is just so good. Boozer may not generate the same highlight buzz as some of the players above him, but he's one of the most reliable, smart, and consistent players in college basketball. His feel for the game is incredibly advanced, and he consistently uses his physicality to make smart, winning decisions on both ends of the floor. He's the kind of player that analytics-driven scouts will absolutely love, because he just always seems to make the right play on the basketball court and he wins wherever he goes. In saying that, I don't mean to project Boozer as a low-ceiling, high-floor kind of prospect that some people have been making him out to be, because he definitely has the potential to be a perennial all-star. I mean, he's actually the youngest player in this draft class, which feels incredibly wrong considering that his game is a lot more polished than basically any of his peers. Offensively, Boozer scores efficiently without needing the ball constantly, whether that's through strong finishes inside, timely cuts, or knocking down open shots. He understands spacing and plays within the flow of an offense. The primary concerns you'll see for Boozer revolve around archetype. At 6'9", he's in that tweener range, not quite a rim protecting 5, not quite a switch everything wing. He doesn't have elite vertical pop or lightning lateral quickness, but if that's the biggest question mark on your scouting report, you're in good shape. Boozer is just so skilled, so instinctive, does so many things right on the basketball court, and is so productive that you'll trust that he'll carve out value regardless of how the league tries to categorize him. Wilson's dynamic charge towards this year's top 3 has been sadly put on hold after he fractured his hand on the 10th of February, but signs seem to be pointing towards him returning sooner rather than later. Wilson is probably the most athletic player in the class as a 6'10" forward who can dominate above the rim, showcased by his already impressive collection of electric dunks in his young career, leading the nation with an absurd 66 slams in just 24 games. At this stage of his development, I would say Wilson's defense is currently the strongest side of his game, as he has that rare ability of truly being able to guard 1 through 5. He's a fiery competitor who brings that edge to the defensive end, taking tough assignments personally, staying locked in possession after possession, and playing with that kind of intensity that just continues to consistently impact games. Wilson's 3-point shooting is the main reason that he hasn't broken into that tier of the top 3 for me, sitting at 26% on the season, but his mid-range progression across the past few months has given me optimism that he could swing that skill. Darius Acuff has been an absolute superstar this year for the Razorbacks and cemented himself as one of the top prospects even in this loaded draft class. Acuff is one of my favourite prospects in this class, and I feel like I've had him higher than consensus basically the whole season. One of my reasons for this is just how consistent Acuff has been as a scorer all season. I mean, just listen to the point totals he has scored over the past few months. 28, 17, 22, 20, 49, 31, 28, 24, 22, 21, 31, 17, 20, 18, 19, 26, 29, 17, 27, 23, 20, 18, 17, 21. The lowest he's scored in about 4 months is 17 points. That level of consistency from especially a guard is just really hard to find. Acuff is listed at 6'3", so there are always going to be questions on how he will succeed on the NBA court, particularly on the defensive end, but he's just such a good offensive player that you can't overlook it. His assist-to-turnover ratio is amazing at around a 3. He projects to be a good lead guard in the NBA. He can create for himself out of almost any situation. He's incredibly dynamic off the dribble. His shooting splits are around 50, 40, 80. There's really just so much to like in terms of real offensive star power prowess, and I think guards like him can just figure it out at the next level. At 6'4", Kingston Flemings is the type of tough, well-rounded guard that coaches are going to trust immediately. The handle is tight, he changes speed well, and he's one of the best natural playmakers in this class. Add in his ability to get downhill as a slasher, and you're looking at someone who can genuinely run an NBA offense. One of my favourite things about Flemings' game is the depth of his scoring package. He doesn't rely on one move, he has counters for his counters. If you cut off the drive, he'll stop short and hit the mid-range. If the big steps up, he's comfortable with the floater. He can finish creatively off the glass. There's a smoothness to his game in the way that he operates, not overly flashy, just controlled and methodical, and defenders often end up off balance or out of position because he's always a step ahead. I would like to see Kingston take some more threes, as he's only averaging about 3 a game, but he's connecting on around 37%, which is pretty good. If he's able to keep up that percentage whilst adding more to his volume, his ceiling as an NBA guard rises considerably. In a draft loaded with point guards, I have him towards the top of that group because I trust their decision making, and I trust the ability to control a game. He just feels like a guard who will end up being an engine for a good team. Keaton Wagler is one of, if not the, player who has risen up draft boards the most over the course of the draft cycle, and it's really not hard to see why. Wagler has an NBA frame as a broad but lean 6'6" guard/wing with sneaky hops. The Illinois freshman is a calm and collected knockdown shooter, connecting on about 42% from deep. He's the kind of player that can really catch fire, as we saw when he dropped 46 points at Purdue earlier this season. Whilst the other guards I have projected in the lottery are perhaps more shifty than Wagler, he's one of the best at creating and scoring through contact, which really bodes well in an NBA setting. And even though he's not a natural point guard, he's a better playmaker than he gets credit for. He makes quick reads on drives, hits shooters in the corners, and keeps the ball moving without over-dribbling. He's not going to run an offense full time, but he absolutely fits as a secondary creator who can score efficiently and make smart decisions. Just as I started to finally drop Mikel Brown Jr. on my board after what has so far been a pretty disappointing season, he picked his game right up with a 45-point explosion against NC State, followed by 2 29-point outings against Baylor and SMU, showcasing the potential scouts saw in him going into the season. The 6'5" springy freshman is another player in this class with a pretty smooth game. He gets to his spots, has a good handle for a bigger guard, and has actually been a really good playmaker so far this year. Mikel's finishing through traffic this season has been pretty subpar, and it may take a bit of time to adapt to the physicality of the NBA game. Brown's 3-point shot is a pretty interesting case to monitor because he improved throughout his high school career and shot a crazy 48% from 3 at the Under-19s World Cup last year, but this season for Louisville he sits at just 34%. The recent breakout games are a strong reminder of the upside. When he's in rhythm, he looks like one of the most gifted scorers in the class, but after the slow start, I need to see that level sustained over a longer stretch before fully buying back into him as a locked-in elite scorer and a top 5 caliber prospect. Braden Burries is another guard in this class that I've been higher on than most for a while, mainly due to how I think he'll scale in an NBA setting. I don't think he has the upside of any of the players that I've mentioned so far, but I would be surprised if he doesn't end up becoming a key connecting piece and contributor. Burries is a strong, smart 6'4" two-way guard who can score efficiently at all 3 levels. He has shown a great ability to score off-ball and on-ball, although to a bit lesser of a degree. He's most comfortable playing within structure, he moves well without the ball, understands timing on cuts and relocations, makes quick decisions when the ball swings his way. He can run a little bit of pick and roll, make some reads, and get to a mid-range jumper, but I see him more of a secondary handler than a primary engine. Despite being a freshman, Boris feels like the type of prospect a contender would value highly, someone who can step into a rotation, play within a structure, and elevate lineups without needing high usage with his great two-way play. That said, I believe his game is adaptable enough that he'll provide value regardless of where he lands. Whether on a rebuilding team or a playoff roster, Boris projects as a kind of steady, connective contributor who helps make everything else work. LeBaron Philon is the first returner off the board for me here, as he's having a stellar season for Bama in which he has more than doubled his scoring output from last year on efficient shooting. Him being at 10 just shows how good this class is, because this guy really does have great potential. He's a shifty and creative guard who doesn't shy away from contact. His free throw rate is really good, and he's great at generating space with his spin moves, whether that's into a layup or a fading midi. As a playmaker, the vision is definitely there. He sees skip passes, weak side shooters, and hands dump offs to bigs, but there are stretches where he'll kind of predetermine reads or hold onto the ball a half second too long instead of making the simple play. Cleaning up that processing speed, making quicker and more decisive reads will be important as he transitions to tighter NBA windows. Defensively, the on-ball upside is very legitimate. He has quick hands, good anticipation, and the lateral agility to stay in front of opposing players. He generates deflections and can disrupt ball handlers to an extent. Yaxel Lenderborg takes the 11th spot here on my board. The long 6'9" senior out of Michigan is one of the most versatile players in this class. He can play a variety of roles on both sides of the ball, is a very well-rounded player, and has a good feel for the game. He feels like the jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none kind of prospect to me, as in he has great size and can do a little bit of everything. Good playmaker, good defender, good finisher, good motor, just a flat-out really good basketball player. Let's get this out of the way. Yes, Yaxel is very old for an NBA prospect, as he will be almost 24 years old on draft night. Despite having him this high, I would be surprised if he goes in the lottery because of this reason. He feels like the kind of player who will end up going around 17th to a semi-contender and produce well immediately. You would like Yaxel to be a bit more consistent. There have been months where he shot around 40% from 3 and others around 20, but the form of free throw percentage gives me belief it will get to a point more towards the 40% sample. Nate Ament has had an up and down season so far, but really came into his own at the start of 2026, averaging more than 23 points across 10 games. Ament is an incredibly raw prospect who will hopefully fill that kind of facilitating stretch jumbo forward role that teams seem to have been looking for lately. Ament has been pretty good at attacking the rim and drawing fouls with his long strides and crafty finishing, and shows a lot of fluidity on the interior, which gives me hope in his outside game progressing. Whilst Nate has that ability to just shoot right over defenders and is meant to be one of the best long-range shooters in the draft, he has just really struggled with creating separation on his looks and connecting, sitting at about 33% on the season. I think Ament has a pretty good chance of being taken higher than this on draft night because he's the kind of high upside intangible wing with shooting promise that teams will take a swing on. Braylon Mullins is a frontrunner for the title of best shooter in the class, shooting over 38% from 3 on more than 6 attempts a game. And it's not a diet of simple standstill looks. Mullins is taking movement threes, fading off pin downs, relocating along the arc, and shooting off quick reversals. At about 6'6" with solid length and proportions, Mullins is the kind of player who can shift the defense without having the ball in his hands just because of his shooting threat. Where I'm more conflicted is on the defensive end. Mullins has shown quick hands and strong anticipation in passing lanes. He reads skip passes well and can generate transition opportunities off deflections. There's awareness there, and he doesn't look disengaged per se, but I have seen quite a few possessions or games where more explosive guards turn the corner on him or just rise up straight past him. His lateral quickness is solid, not elite, and against NBA level athletes that margin quickly shrinks. I think his shooting talent alone warrants him to be a first round selection, but if he can tighten up his defense into a more 3-and-D wing like I hope, he would justify a lottery selection. Christian Anderson has emerged as one of the most impactful guards in college basketball this season, and will need to take on an even greater role for the Red Raiders following the season-ending injury to JT Toppin. Anderson has firmly established himself as the engine of Texas Tech's offense, combining high-level playmaking with elite perimeter shooting. A true point guard, Anderson excels at the two most important responsibilities of the position: passing and shooting. He ranks among the national leaders in assists per game at around 7, demonstrating his ability to control tempo and consistently create quality looks for his teammates. At the same time, he's shooting roughly 42% from 3 on high volume, making him one of the most efficient and dangerous long-range threats in the country. He makes the right reads, rarely forces bad shots, and understands when to facilitate versus when to take over. He's equally comfortable knocking down catch-and-shoot threes or creating his own look off the dribble late in the clock. Just outside the lottery, I have Dalen Swain, who I know a lot of people are really high on this year, and I'm starting to get there myself. Swain is doing pretty much everything for Texas this season, leading the team in points, rebounds, assists, and steals. He has been tasked with creating his own offense a lot more than his first 2 college seasons, and he's responded by turning into one of the most productive two-way wings in the country. The 6'8" forward is a lockdown wing with NBA-level athleticism. He can guard multiple positions, contest shots at the rim, disrupt passing lanes, and create a lot of turnovers, averaging 1.8 steals a night. Swain's shot looks a bit awkward, but his progression from behind the arc across his career has been very encouraging. He shot 15% from 3 as a freshman, 25% as a sophomore, and now 34% as a junior, all whilst making 80% at the line. Thomas Houck is the type of player that coaches love. He has an unreal motor for a forward, he always seems to be scrambling on both sides of the ball, and he really does all the dirty work. What makes Houck so valuable is how naturally he fits into the flow of a game. He cuts hard off ball, runs the floor in transition, and punishes late closeouts, whilst also keeping the offense connected as a willing passer. He knows his role, takes the right shots, and plays well within a system, which makes him an easy player to build around as a glue guy. The defending champion Florida Gators have utilised Houck in so many ways this season, and he's one of the biggest reasons that they've been able to pick up their play after a slow start. Houck is the kind of connective forward that every good team needs, and that's why he's widely viewed as one of the safest bets in this year's draft. Where would Iowa be without Bennett Sturtz? Now in his final collegiate season with the Iowa Hawkeyes, Sturtz has taken everything he learned from his years at Drake and translated it into being one of the most important players in college basketball. A savvy senior floor general who can run an offense, score efficiently, and create opportunities for teammates. He's an excellent shooter from deep, making around 39% of his attempts, and quite a few of those have been from pretty far out. That said, he isn't an explosive athlete and doesn't consistently get all the way to the rim, which limits his ability to finish over bigger, more athletic defenders. His game relies heavily on craft, timing, and decision making rather than raw athleticism, which could present challenges at the NBA level. His shooting, decision making, and leadership make him a dependable anchor for his team and a potential solid role player at the professional level. Merez Johnson Jr. is an elite interior finisher who knows exactly how to play to his strengths. Most of his offense comes at the rim through lobs, dump-offs, offensive rebounds, cuts, and transition runs, and he converts them at a very high rate, currently shooting 65% from the field. As a roller, he gets vertical quickly, presents himself as a big target, and finishes without bringing the ball down. His second jump is quick, which helps him clean up misses and generate easy points. From 3, he's shooting 36%, even though it's on less than 1 attempt a game, but at least there's something to work with there for NBA teams to try and develop. Defensively, Johnson isn't a rim protector per se, but he's a pretty good weak side defender, and he's had a couple of powerful blocks already this season. Here I have Hannes Steinbach, a big yet agile 6'11 forward with great athleticism and rebounding traits. What pops pretty quickly when watching the German's tape is just how quickly he can move despite almost being a 7-footer, whether that's streaking down the court in transition or moving his way to the rim in a half-court setting. Steinbach is 4th in the nation for rebounds a game, averaging over 11, and he just has a knack for attacking the glass on both ends. His 3-point jump shooting has developed a bit over this season, which is always great to see, and he seems to have a good enough basketball IQ to be an above-average playmaker for an NBA 4. The defensive concerns are pretty real with Hannes. He gets scored over a concerning amount, but as a 4, I think teams can hide that a little bit, and I can also see him getting a little bit better in this regard when he starts training with an NBA team. It's strange that the first player on my board not playing college basketball is this low. Whilst this class is seemingly very strong, it's one of the weakest we've seen in international talent in quite a while. Karim Lopez is strong, tall for his position, has good handles, shoots the ball well, and has good mobility on both sides of the ball. I actually got a chance to see Lopez play earlier in the NBL season for the New Zealand Breakers, and I was quite impressed by his size and the way that he moves around the court. The Mexican played an increased role for the Breakers towards the end of the season and managed to keep up his splits of around 50-40-75, including a 32-point game against Melbourne. I can see a world in which Lopez is a steal in this draft. Chris Sanak is the next upside swing I'd take. The 6'11" Houston forward just turned 19 last month, and he's already showcased that he has a lot of raw skill for an NBA team to pick. Sanak projects to be a guy who can stretch the floor a bit, handle the ball, and make plays with his improving face-up game. I think he will be a good enough defender in the NBA, especially as a shot blocker, and he has good enough lateral movement to switch onto small plays and pick and rolls and hedge effectively on guards. The key for Sanak will be consistency and decision making. His tools are undeniable, but translating them to the NBA will require patience and development from the team that selects him. Koa Pete has been one of the biggest factors for Arizona's amazing regular season. He's a strong and athletic paint-dominating forward who has just been bulldozing his way to buckets all season long. His game comes mostly from within the paint, but he also has some versatility to stretch out to the elbows and mid-post area. He has good defensive chops to be able to slide into an NBA role, but I'm a little bit concerned about how his offensive game will fit at the level, with his three-point volume being tremendously low. Still, Pete has shown that he's a versatile winning player, and I feel like you can't have him much lower than this because of what he's shown us this far. Jaden Quaitons is without a doubt the most mysterious and polarizing player in this year's draft. I see people that have kept him in their top 10 on their boards, and others that have almost given up entirely. Jaden played only 4 games this season on a minutes restriction and looked monstrously huge, but also very raw. He played last season for Arizona State, utilizing his strong frame to be a beast on the defensive end. His offensive game is pretty lacking at this stage of his career, and he hasn't really had a chance to develop it much past offensive putbacks, but the frame and defensive prowess makes Jaden an intriguing selection for any team. That being said, all the injury stuff is just more than a little concerning, especially the fact that we haven't seen him play for months and months, and I've just found myself losing patience, particularly with how good this class is. However, I still think that there's a good chance that some team believes in him and takes him pretty early. Cameron Carr has exploded onto the national scene this season, averaging around 19 points per game after averaging just 3 points over his first 2 college seasons. Carr spaces the floor effectively, can score off the catch, and finish in transition with his high-flying athleticism, but the processing of his self-creation needs a bit of work if he wants to fit anything more than a 3-and-D kind of label. Still, the physical tools are extremely intriguing. At around 6'5" with a wingspan reported near 7'1" or 7'2", Carr plays far bigger than his height and uses that length to finish above the rim, block shots from the weak side, and disrupt passing lanes on defense. He thrives as an off-ball scorer, relocating around the perimeter, cutting into open space, and attacking closeouts with long strides and explosive vertical pop. His shooting breakout has been a major driver of his rise, knocking down 39% of his threes at a high clip. Ade Mara is a really unique prospect. The 7'3" Spanish center has enormous size and length, but what really stands out is his skill level for someone that big. He can score efficiently around the rim at almost 68% field goal percentage on the season, and he makes a lot of plays as a passer, especially for his size. Standing at 7'3" with massive reach, Mara is naturally an imposing defensive presence. He protects the paint well and racks up blocks simply by being in the right place and using his length, making him one of the better rim protectors amongst bigs in this draft class. I don't think Mara will ever be a decent shooter, sitting at just over 50% from the free throw line this year, which obviously limits his ceiling as an NBA player quite a bit. As with basically any player of his size, mobility, strength, and injury concerns are always going to be somewhat present, but overall his combination of size, rim protection, and passing ability makes him a very intriguing long-term big man prospect. Patrick Gungba is another very divisive player in this class. I've seen him top 10 on several boards, which I don't quite understand, but I definitely see him as a first-round talent. The 6'11" big brings great size and length and plays a fairly simple offensive role, setting strong screens, finishing around the rim, and providing a big target as a lob threat. His touch inside is solid, and he's shown some flashes of passing feel from the high post. He isn't the most explosive leaper and can look a bit heavy-footed at times, which could limit his defensive versatility when guarding in space. But still, with his size, strength, and interior presence, Gungbo projects as the type of traditional center who can rebound, protect the rim, and anchor lineups if his development continues in the right direction. If Tyler Tanner wasn't below 6 feet tall, I would have him a lot higher on this list, but it's just really hard to trust a player with that much of a starting disadvantage. That being said, Tanner has been one of the best guards in college basketball this year, averaging 19 points, 5 assists, and 2.5 steals. Tanner thrives with the ball in his hands and plays the game at a really fast tempo. He's extremely quick with a tight handle, allowing him to break down defenders, get into the lane, and force rotations from the defense. Once he collapses the defense, he's capable of either finishing himself with his surprisingly bouncy athleticism or kicking the ball out to open teammates. He's also an extremely disruptive defender at the point of attack. His quick hands and anticipation leads to a lot of steals, and he plays with the kind of energy that can really speed up opposing guards. Henry Visa is an intriguing modern big prospect thanks to his combination of size and offensive skill. The 7-foot-tall Estonian moves well for his frame and looks pretty comfortable playing both around the basket and out on the perimeter, which gives him a pretty clear pathway to a role at the next level. Offensively, he has a great face-up game and is capable of knocking down perimeter shots, sitting at over 40% from 3 at almost 3 attempts a game. His touch around the rim is solid and he runs the floor well in transition, often beating opposing centers down the court. He relies more on length and positioning than physical dominance on both sides of the ball, which is good in some ways, but I still think he needs to add a bit more strength if he wants to go to battle with NBA players down low. Amari Allen is a smooth, big forward who combines NBA-ready size with a reliable shooting stroke. At 6'8" with a strong frame, he has the physical tools teams look for in a modern wing/forward who can guard multiple positions and space the floor. Allen fits really well into a complementary role. He's comfortable scoring off the catch, stepping into perimeter jumpers, and attacking closeouts to finish around the rim. For most of the season, do not look up his last 2 games. He's been a pretty consistent option for the Crimson Tide. Combine that with his positional size, versatility, and good shooting for a forward, and you can see why some teams are going to fall in love with Amari as an NBA contributor. And just because you guys haven't seen enough today, my first round big board ends with another point guard. Abuka Okori is only behind AJ DeBarnstar in terms of points per game as a freshman, and he's already scored 30 points several times this season. Over his last 5 games, he's averaging near 25 points and 5 assists on 50-50-80 splits, showing efficiency in production that demands attention. Okori is a creative scoring guard who plays with space, confidence, and control. He can attack the rim off the bounce, pull up from the mid-range, or rise for floaters in traffic. His handle is tight, he changes speed effortlessly, and he has the kind of craft that makes defenders hesitate or leave their feet a bit too early. If he doesn't return back to school, which there's a good chance he does, he's definitely an intriguing option for teams at the end of day 1 or the start of day 2, but there are a few smaller guards that I like more than Okori in this class. And that wraps up my first round big board for this year's draft class. I'm just getting started with content like this, so if there's anything you want to see next or ideas for what I should add or improve, let me know, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.